She said I was trespassing on the land where I buried my wife. There are moments in life that catch you completely off guard, not because you didn't see them coming, but because you never thought they'd dare show up. It was a Tuesday morning in July, the kind where the Texas heat shows no mercy even before sunrise. I just finished an all-night emergency electrical job out at the Johnson farm. Power outage, broken lines, took me until dawn to get it fixed. I was bone tired, the kind of tired that makes your soul feel heavy. All I wanted was to check the mail, get home, feed the cattle, and maybe sit on the porch for a minute. That was the plan. I pulled up in my old F-150, the one Mary and I bought used the year we got married, back when our biggest luxury was air conditioning that actually worked. The truck, been through it all, still ticks when it cools, still groans when you shift her too quick, but she runs, and more importantly, she belongs. I stopped at the gate like I always do. 50 acres. Harrison Ranch. A place carved out of blood, sweat, and 20 years of stubborn. I stepped out, stretched my back, and reached into the mailbox. Then came the honk. Not just a polite beep. No, this was the kind of blaring horn you'd hear if the world was ending. I turned around just in time to see a brand new white Mercedes skid to a stop inches from my bumper. Tires screeched. Gravel scattered. Dust rose like smoke from a battlefield. She stepped out before the engine even died. Clipboard in one hand, purse swinging from the other, power heels stabbing into the dirt like she was trying to pierce the earth itself, hair so stiff it could survive a hurricane, makeup painted on like war paint. I knew who she was before she even opened her mouth. Karen Whitmore, President of the Pinehurst Estates Homeowners Association. The HOA Queen. And judging by the look in her eyes, I just committed some sort of crime against her kingdom. "You cannot park here," she shrieked. Her voice rang out across the fields, loud enough to spook the cattle half a mile away. A few of them lowed in protest, tails swatting at flies like they were embarrassed on my behalf. I just blinked, looked down at the dirt under my boots, then up at the truck, then at her. "Ma'am," I said slowly, "this is my land." She scoffed, loudly. "You are in violation of Resolution 47B of the Pinehurst HOA, she said, jabbing her clipboard at me like it was a sword. "This is now considered part of the extended subdivision boundary, and your vehicle is an eyesore." I looked at the sign, my sign, that sat proudly on the edge of the driveway. Harrison Ranch, established 2005. Weathered, cracked, still standing, kind of like me. "This here's my driveway," I said. "Been parking here every morning for 20 years. No one's ever complained, because no one's ever been foolish enough to think they could claim it." Karen flipped through her papers like she was looking for a Bible verse that would smite me on the spot. "I know my HOA rights," she snapped. "We voted to extend the boundaries last month. It passed, which means this falls under our jurisdiction now. And that," she pointed at my truck like it had personally insulted her family, "that's bringing down property values." I stared at her for a long second, and I'll admit, a part of me wondered if she was joking, if there was a hidden camera crew nearby filming some new reality show when HOA presidents lose their minds. But no cameras, just Karen, standing on my land, sweating through her blouse, still acting like she was the sheriff of Pinehurst. I crossed my arms and gave her my best calm rancher smile. "Ma'am," I said again, "this isn't a subdivision. This is Harrison Ranch, 50 acres of private property that I bought with my wife back when this land was nothing but scrub brush and cow trails." Her eyes narrowed. "Well then," she said, switching tones like she'd rehearsed it, "why don't you just sell the ranch to us? I'll give you a very generous offer." I almost laughed, almost. "Sell," I asked, "to you?" "If you don't," she said, voice turning cold, "I'll make sure you have to leave anyway." My stomach tightened. The words hit me like a gut punch, not because I was afraid but because of what this place meant. This was the land where I taught Jake how to ride a horse. Where Mary and I used to sit on the porch, drinking sweet tea and watching the sun dip behind the hills. Where we scattered her ashes under the big oak tree after the cancer finally took her. "You want to make me leave," I said softly. "This land's more than just dirt and grass to me, lady, it's everything." But she wasn't listening. Karen pulled out her phone. And in the same breathless tone someone might use to report a burglar, she said, 911, yes, there's a man trespassing on HOA property, refusing to leave, acting aggressively. He could be dangerous. I blinked, then chuckled. I wasn't even mad, not yet. I just took out my own phone and started recording. Karen didn't notice at first. She was too busy packing and ranting, using words like immediate threat and suspicious vehicle while I leaned back against my truck and sent a simple text to Jake. "Son, I'm gonna need you soon." Didn't explain why, didn't need to, he'd know. And I didn't say who he was, not to Karen, not yet. Sirens echoed in the distance. Karen beamed. "Finally," she said, "you're going to jail for trespassing, I know my rights." Funny thing, people who say that the loudest usually don't. The patrol car pulled up with a familiar crunch of tires. 2 officers stepped out. Both looked like they were running low on patience and caffeine. One of them, Officer Williams, did a double take when he saw me. Recognition flickered across his face. But he kept it cool. Karen ran to them like a pageant contestant, accepting an award. "Officers, this man is illegally parked on HOA property. He's threatening me. Look at his truck. He's decreasing values across the whole subdivision." The officers looked at me, looked at my truck, looked at the Harrison Ranch sign right behind it. Then looked at each other like they'd just been roped into an improv skit they didn't want to be in. Williams stepped forward. "Sir," he said respectfully, "do you have identification and proof of ownership?" I handed him my license and the ranch deed. He looked it over, passed it to the second officer. They nodded. "You're clearly on your own land," he said, handing it back. "No violations here." Karen's mouth dropped open. But he's destroying our views. That rusty truck is ruining Pinehurst's image." Williams gave her the kind of look you give a dog that won't stop barking at a mailbox. "Ma'am," he said, "he has the right to park any legally registered vehicle on his own property, even if it's rusty." I smiled. Karen didn't. "I'm posting this everywhere," she screeched. "Our Facebook group is going to explode. Everyone will see what kind of man you really are." I raised my phone, which had been streaming live for the past 20 minutes. "Already done," I said. "Say hello to 5,000 viewers. You're trending, ma'am." Her face went white. The officers walked away, warning her not to misuse emergency services again. She stormed back to her Mercedes. But I knew this wasn't over. And I had a feeling she hadn't seen the last surprise this ranch had in store for her. Because what she didn't know was who was on the way. And why the next time the law showed up, Karma might be wearing a badge. And calling me Dad. She called 911. Again, this time because my truck was parked 5 degrees off center. It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so personal. 3 days after that first showdown in my driveway, Karen came back, not with a clipboard this time, with reinforcements and a tape measure. She didn't march, she paraded. 2 other Pinehurst board members trailed behind her, all in matching pastel polos like they were part of some suburban militia. And there she was, leading the charge, heels stabbing into my gravel again like the earth itself had offended her. I watched from the porch, coffee in hand, as she crouched next to my truck and held up a level like she was performing a surgery. Then she took pictures, dozens of them, from every angle. And when she finished, she handed a piece of paper to a teenage boy who looked like he wished he were anywhere else. The kid climbed my porch steps, eyes wide with apology. "Sir, you've been served." It was a fine notice. $500. For improper parking at a non-harmonious angle approx. 95 degrees. She'd actually measured it. That was the moment I realized something important. This wasn't about rules. It wasn't about property values. It wasn't even about parking. It was about control. Karen wasn't trying to fix anything. She was trying to break me. I stood there holding that paper, feeling a slow burn settle into my chest. The kind that doesn't make you scream or shout. The kind that makes you build. So I did what any Texas rancher with a grudge and some hay bales would do. I got creative. Every Valentine's Day since Mary passed, I arranged bales into a heart in the front pasture. She used to call it redneck romance. But this year, I added something new. I parked my truck right in the center of that heart. Let her measure that. The photo hit my live stream by noon. By evening, we had 50,000 viewers. That's when something unexpected started happening. People began sharing their own stories. A woman in Arizona who'd been fined $250 for having sunflowers taller than HOA height guidelines. A single dad in Florida who got evicted from a rental because he parked a company van outside overnight. A retired veteran from North Carolina whose HOA threatened to tow his RV while he was attending his wife's funeral. My inbox flooded. What started as one man standing in front of a clipboard turned into a movement. We called it Parking with Bob. Nightly streams, new arrangements, neighbors loaning me their trucks to create displays, stars, smiley faces, even spelled out Texas one night across the front lot. I taught Jake to parallel park right there, I told the stream one evening. Took him 15 tries. He was nervous, said, "Dad, I promise I'll protect this place." Funny how life turns out. The donations started rolling in, not money for me, but for others fighting HOA overreach. Legal aid, support, community. Meanwhile, Karen was doubling down. She created a Facebook group, Pinehurst Against Parking Violations. It gained 300 members in 2 days. She posted photos of my truck daily, each one captioned like she was tracking a fugitive. Then came her next escalation. A formal letter on Pinehurst HOA letterhead slipped under my door by the same nervous teenager. It read, "The presence of Harrison Ranch adjacent to Pinehurst Estates significantly diminishes property desirability and value. We request immediate sale and incorporation into the HOA community." That was it. The truth in black and white. She didn't care about parking, she wanted my land. The streams exploded. Viewers scoured public records. Turns out Karen had a history. She expanded Pinehurst's boundaries before, and suspiciously, the HOA had acquired 4 other properties along the way. Someone found a copy of Resolution 47B. It was a fake, never filed with the county. It was just paper, waved like a weapon. Karen had tried to manufacture jurisdiction where none existed. And now, 75,000 people knew. That night, Jake called me. "You doing okay, Dad?" "Better than okay, son," I said. "But this thing, it's bigger than parking now." "I know, that's why tomorrow," he paused, his voice quiet but certain. "You should bring backup." The next morning, I kept my promise. 10 pickup trucks, ranchers from all around, old friends, folks I'd helped over the years showing up with engines and grit. We spelled out a word across the pasture. My land. Seen from space, probably. Or at least from Karen's upstairs window, where sure enough she was already filming. She called 911 in exactly 12 minutes. One of my viewers had started a betting pool. This time the officer didn't even get out of the cruiser before sighing. He recognized me, recognized her, knew the drill. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, weariness in every syllable, "we've had this conversation." But 10 trucks, she sputtered. "This is psychological warfare." "Ma'am," the officer said flatly, "they're legally parked on private property." She didn't stop there. She whipped out a tablet and launched a PowerPoint. 47 slides, titled, "The Parking Terrorism of Bob Harrison." Slide 23 featured my Valentine's heart arrangement, labeled, "Emotional Manipulation via Vehicle Placement." Slide 31 had red arrows, measurements, color-coded zones. I couldn't help but stream it. The live chat went feral. And then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it mid-rant, froze, her eyes locked on the screen, her hand trembled. I leaned in slightly, just enough to glimpse it. A text. "Mom, I just saw the live stream. What are you doing? This is embarrassing." Jessica. Her daughter. For a split second, she looked human, lost, small. Then something shifted, like a mask slipping back into place. "She doesn't understand," Karen muttered, voice cracking. "I'm protecting the community. I know my HOA rights." But she was unraveling. That's when 82-year-old Georgia Thompson, my neighbor since before Pinehurst was even built, slowly climbed out of her ancient Buick and walked right up to Karen. Walker in hand, purse swinging. And with the voice of someone who'd survived the Great Depression, 2 wars, and 50 Texas summers, she let loose. "50 years I've lived here. Bob Harrison is the best damn neighbor I've ever had. He fixed my roof after that tornado, brings me groceries when I can't drive. You're harassing him over parking." The crowd of neighbors murmured agreement. Karen opened her mouth to respond. Georgia raised her hand and shut it for her. "You know what ruins property values?" she snapped. "You turning neighbor against neighbor with your clipboards and fake rules. His ranch is why folks move here, you're just noise." And standing there, with 10 trucks spelling MY land, neighbors at my side, and the live chat exploding with messages of support, I realized something. This wasn't just a battle over parking anymore. This was a line in the dirt. One that said, "Enough." That night, I ended the stream with one sentence. "Tomorrow, y'all meet my backup." The chat went wild. But across the property line, I saw Karen in her upstairs window again, phone in hand, eyes fixed on the stream. This time, she wasn't smiling. This time, she looked scared. She had no idea what was coming. But she was about to learn that some last names come with more than history. They come with a badge. She wanted the sheriff to arrest me, but she didn't know the sheriff calls me Dad. The next day started like any other. Sort of. The Texas sun had just crested the hills, casting long, golden shadows over the pasture. Dew glistened on the fence posts. The cattle moved slow, grazing in peace. But inside me, a storm was building. Today was the day Karen would learn the truth. Not just about my land, or my truck, or how deep this community's roots ran. She'd learn who she was really fighting. At exactly noon, I stood at the front of Harrison Ranch, 10 trucks arranged behind me in a perfect star formation. The arrangement had taken hours. I'd measured each angle twice. It was flawless. It wasn't just art anymore. It was defiance. Across the property line, the circus arrived. Karen, in a new power suit, glittering heels, clipboard like a weapon. Behind her, an entourage of Pinehurst diehards, 15 of them carrying signs that said, "Stop Parking Terrorism" and "HOA Rights Matter." There was even a drone buzzing overhead like an angry hornet. Some poor teenage kid was piloting it, eyes wide with confusion. Karen strutted up to the trucks, like a general on the battlefield. "Bob Harrison," she screamed. Her voice cracked through the air like a whip. "This ends now." "I've brought witnesses," she added, gesturing dramatically at her followers. 15 of them, and today you'll face consequences." She didn't know how right she was. The live stream was already at 90,000 viewers. I just stood there, calm, arms crossed, letting the drama build. The drone circled, the air crackled. And then, we heard it. The low, powerful growl of a Dodge Charger cruiser pulling into the driveway. That unmistakable hum of authority. Karen lit up like a Christmas tree. "Yes," she shrieked. "Finally, real enforcement." She ran toward the cruiser, heels clacking against gravel, already mid-rant. "This man has turned parking into psychological warfare. He's destroying our property values with strategic vehicle placement. Arrest him." The driver's door opened slowly. Deliberately. And out stepped Sheriff Jake Harrison. In full uniform. Badge gleaming in the sun. Karen didn't even notice at first. She just kept rambling, pointing at my trucks, waving her clipboard like a sword of justice. And then, Jake said it. 2 words. Simple, calm, sharp as a blade. "Hey, Dad." The world stopped. You could hear the cattle munching grass in the back pasture. Karen froze mid-sentence. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. The clipboard slipped from her fingers and clattered to the ground. The drone crashed into a fence post. One of her witnesses whispered, Did he just say Dad?" The live chat exploded into chaos, caps lock everywhere, plot twist of the year, the sheriff is his son. Across the street, neighbors were pressed to their windows, recording, cheering. Even old Mr. Franklin shuffled out in his bathrobe, gave me a thumbs up and muttered, "Well, I'll be damned." Karen finally found her voice, but it came out as a squeak. "No, this is a conflict of interest. Corruption, nepotism, I'll report this to the state." Jake stepped forward, expression unreadable. "Yes, ma'am, I'm Sheriff Jake Harrison. Bob Harrison is my father." He turned to the crowd, then to the stream camera, then back to Karen. "And now, I'd very much like to understand why our department has received 12 emergency calls about my dad parking on his own property." Karen sputtered, took a step back. I was protecting the community." Jake raised an eyebrow. 12 times, you've called 911 about legal parking. Once, while officers were responding to a burglary across town, you delayed a real crime response because someone's truck was angled slightly off-center. Karen tried to recover. He's been harassing us with vehicle art." Jake pulled out a notepad. "Mrs. Whitmore, let's be clear. You've accused my father of assault through parking formations." The crowd laughed. The live chat went nuclear. Jake continued, voice professional but firm. "We've reviewed the calls, the videos, the fake HOA resolution. Turns out Resolution 47B was never legally filed." Karen's face drained of color. "And yet," Jake said, "you used it as justification to harass a property owner, serve fake fines, and organize a targeted campaign of public disturbance." But he's ruining everything," she screamed, her voice now shrill with desperation. "His land is ugly, his truck is a rust bucket, this is all wrong." Jake's eyes narrowed. "Ma'am, this land was here before Pinehurst existed. My mom and dad built it from nothing. My mom's ashes are buried beneath that oak tree over there." The crowd grew silent. "People like you," Jake continued, "don't build communities, you buy them, then complain that they're not perfect enough." One of Karen's witnesses started backing away. Then another. The drone kid quietly packed up his controller and muttered, "I didn't sign up for this." Karen turned to her followers, panicked. But they weren't looking at her. They were looking at me. Jake stepped forward one last time. "I became a sheriff to protect people," he said. "People like my dad. People who work hard, mind their business, and deserve peace on their own land." He looked directly at Karen. "You tried to take everything he built, over a truck. You weaponized rules, weaponized fear, and now the law's finally looking back at you." Karen turned to run. But Jake wasn't done. "One more thing," he said, pulling out his phone. "We've been reviewing HOA funds, cross-checking deposits, and guess what? There's $1.5 million missing from the HOA's accounts, the same amount used to buy land surrounding my dad's ranch. You know what that's called, ma'am?" He paused. "Conspiracy to commit fraud." He gasps. Karen froze like she'd been struck. Even her most loyal witness dropped their sign and walked away. Jake's phone buzzed. He glanced down. Also, Patricia at City Hall just agreed to testify about the bribes, the forged paperwork, the whole expansion scam. Karen looked like she might faint. But then she did something I didn't expect. She looked at me. Not with rage. With panic. Desperation. Fear. "This isn't over," she shouted. "I know something about your son, something you don't." Jake and I locked eyes. The moment shifted. The crowd murmured. The chat exploded again. "What does she know? Jump scare, not the sheriff." Karen backed away like a villain exiting stage left. Then she ran to her Mercedes and sped off, gravel flying in every direction. But it was too late. The damage was done. She declared war. And this time, it wasn't just over parking. Something darker was coming. And that night, as I sat on my porch with Jake beside me, we both stared into the fading sunset and wondered. What else is she hiding? At 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of diesel engines. That's when I knew Karen was just getting started. 3 days had passed since Jake's reveal flipped Karen's crusade upside down. 3 days of silence. 3 days without a single clipboard sighting, passive-aggressive note, or 911 call. It should have felt like peace. But I'd lived long enough to know that silence, when it came from people like her, wasn't peace. It was planning. So when I heard the engines at 2 a.m., low, heavy, deliberate, I was already out of bed before the sound fully registered. Diesel. Multiple engines. Not trucks like mine, bigger. I threw on jeans and boots, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped onto the porch. And there they were. 5 semis. Massive 18-wheelers parked across every access road leading in or out of Harrison Ranch. Blocking the gate, the east cattle path, the south service road, even the old gravel lane no one used but me and Jake. They weren't on my land. That was the genius of it. They were on the public road, technically legal, technically impossible to fight without a city permit, and effectively shutting me in like a prisoner in my own home. Karen had found her loophole. Again. I walked out to the main road, phone in hand, streaming live. "Well, folks," I said to 80,000 groggy viewers still awake from the last stream, "seems Karen, not done yet." The camera panned across the semis. Each driver sat inside, engines idling. A few looked down when I approached, embarrassed, ashamed. One rolled down his window. Just a job, sir. She paid us $5,000 each, said it was a legal protest, we're not trying to hurt anyone. I nodded, but my stomach twisted. A sick calf was waiting for a vet visit. A feed delivery was due at dawn. And now I was trapped, helpless. Unless. I walked to the last truck, knocked twice on the door. It opened slowly. Tommy Martinez. I recognized him immediately. We met once years back when he hauled fencing materials to the ranch. Always a bit twitchy, had a reputation for cutting corners. Tommy, I said, holding the camera low, didn't you lose your CDL last year? Insurance fraud, right? He froze. Swallowed hard. I needed the money, he whispered. She said she had connections, that she'd make the paperwork disappear if we got caught. The chat blew up. I didn't say a word, just streamed his face as the guilt poured out of him. Jake showed up an hour later. Not as the sheriff this time, just as my son. His eyes scanned the roadblock, his jaw clenched. He made some quiet phone calls, to the Department of Transportation, to code enforcement, to people who don't like seeing public safety laws twisted by spite. Tommy folded fast. She told us to stay here all week, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Said you, cave, said the HOA would own this place by Christmas. More trucks started pulling away after that. One by one, none of them wanted a felony. By noon, the road was clear again. But Karen wasn't done. That same afternoon, she called an emergency HOA meeting. Over 200 people showed up. Half of them were my supporters, neighbors, ranchers, viewers, people who'd followed the saga from the beginning. Karen took the podium, flanked by security and her new lawyer, a slick, pale man who looked like he charged by the syllable. She looked tired, hair frizzed, mascara smudged. But her voice. Still sharp, still venomous. This man, she said, pointing at me in the audience, has turned our community into a circus. Property values are plummeting. Peace is gone. Order is gone. He's weaponizing parking. I just watched, calm, steady. Then Patricia Anderson stood up. Pinehurst resident, lived 3 doors down from Karen, a woman who'd never once spoken during a meeting. Actually, she said, holding up her phone, I just got off the phone with 3 real estate agents. Property values in Pinehurst are up 15% this quarter. They said it's because Harrison Ranch brings authentic rural charm. Buyers want that. Karen's face twisted. But the real gut punch came minutes later, when a tow truck appeared on the meeting room security monitor. Hooking up my truck. Karen's eyes lit up. There, she shrieked. He parked in a fire lane. It's being towed legally. The room gasped. I just smiled. Well, I said calmly to the stream, y'all are about to see karma in real time. Because that wasn't just any parking spot. It was my spot, at the HOA Center, reserved and legally registered as a disabled veteran space. And I had the placard, the paperwork, everything. Yeah, I don't talk about it much. Don't wear it like a badge, but the back injury, the one that kept me up some nights, that was from my time in the service. They were towing a disabled vet's truck. Illegally. Jake was on the phone before the tow truck even cleared the block. The chat exploded, 200,000 viewers. People screaming, that's theft. She's done. You don't touch that truck. I didn't chase it, didn't scream. Just watched. And streamed. And said one thing. 20 years I've had that truck. Bought it the year Mary and I got married. Every dent, a memory. Every scratch, a story. That's not just a vehicle. It's part of this land, part of me. That night I stood on my porch. The empty space in the driveway felt wrong. Unnatural. But at exactly midnight, headlights appeared. Police vehicles, lots of them. Jake stepped out, 4 officers with him. "Need you to come with me, Dad," he said, his voice all business. "We need you to identify something." The camera kept rolling. We drove in silence through the back roads, until we reached a familiar cul-de-sac. Corinne's house. Lights blazing, Mercedes in the drive. And next to it, my F-150. Just sitting there, on her property, not impounded, not at the tow yard, not processed. Just stolen. Jake stepped forward. "Corinne Whitmore," he announced as she stepped onto her porch in silk pajamas and fuzzy slippers, holding a champagne glass like a trophy. "You're under arrest for grand theft auto." The glass slipped. Shattered. The stream switched feeds, courtesy of one of our viewers who worked for Corinne's doorbell cam company. There she was, on her own front porch, caught in 4K. And then, another twist. My phone buzzed, unknown number. It was the tow truck driver. His voice cracked. "Mr. Harrison, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. She showed me fake papers, said you were evicted, that you were squatting. When I saw the disabled plate, I knew, but she threatened me, said she'd ruin me. I'm turning myself in tomorrow, I'll testify." He was crying. "She made me a thief." And that night, as Corinne was cuffed, ranting about her HOA rights, the live chat passed 300,000 viewers. She'd weaponized parking. And now the law and karma were calling back. She called it parking terrorism. The judge called it a criminal enterprise. 6 weeks later, the courtroom was packed to capacity. Outside, news vans lined the street. Protesters waved signs, some in support of Harrison Ranch, others clutching clipboards like religious relics. Inside, the AC struggled against the heat of public spectacle. The energy was electric, buzzing with anticipation. I sat at the plaintiff's table, wearing the same suit I'd worn to Mary's funeral. Only other time, I'd put it on in the last decade. On the opposite side of the courtroom, Corinne Whitmore shuffled in, flanked by 2 deputies. Orange jumpsuit, wrists shackled. The spray tan she wore like armor had faded to a sickly hue. Her hair, usually coiled into a power bun, now hung limp and lifeless. The contrast wasn't lost on the crowd. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for closure. Sarah Davidson from Channel 7 stood in the aisle, live streaming to over 500,000 people. The People versus Corinne Whitmore, the case that began with a truck and exploded into the biggest HOA scandal in state history, begins today. The judge banged the gavel once. This is a court of law, not a reality show. Though, to be honest, it kind of was. The prosecution opened with a simple title card, projected on the screen behind them. Exhibit A, Corinne's 12 calls about parking. The room fell silent. Then came the audio montage. Each 911 call played back, one after the other. Call 1, there's a suspicious vehicle angled at 93 degrees. Call 4, he's parking in a star shape. It feels like a threat. Call 7, the vehicle's orientation is aggressively east-facing. Could be a message. Laughter rippled through the gallery. The judge asked for order 3 times before finally muting the audio. Then came the response time data. Due to Corinne's false emergency calls, average 911 response times in our county increased by 3 minutes. A domestic violence victim waited 7 extra minutes because 2 units were dispatched to Harrison Ranch to inspect menacing parallel parking. No one was laughing after that. The prosecutor, Janet Brooks, a woman with steel in her eyes and zero tolerance for nonsense, let that silence settle like dust on the bench before she continued. She laid out the timeline. The forged resolution, 47B. The $1.5 million siphoned from HOA funds. The shell companies. The plan to force me off my land. The bribes to city officials to push fake zoning documents through. All of it backed by paper trails, signatures, and perhaps most damning of all, testimony. The first to take the stand. Patricia Hendress, the city hall clerk who cut a deal to avoid jail. Her hands trembled as she spoke. She offered me $50,000, Patricia whispered. All I had to do was file the boundary extension backdated. I said no, so she threatened me. How? Brooks asked. She said she'd leak my son's juvenile record to the press, said she knew editors, that I'd never work again. Gasps echoed around the courtroom. But the real bombshell came when Brooks played the footage of the illegal tow. My F-150 being hauled off from a disabled veteran's space. The entire court stared in silence. I could feel the tears burning behind my eyes as I watched it happen all over again. But the jury didn't just see a truck. They saw 20 years of memories being dragged away. That's when Linda Ramirez, my lawyer and old high school classmate, stood. Calm, confident, wearing boots under her pantsuit like the proud Texan she was. Her opening line. This case isn't about parking, it's about dignity. She paced slowly, letting her words breathe. Mr. Harrison parked his legally registered truck on his legally owned land. He celebrated holidays by arranging borrowed vehicles into hearts, stars, and even spelled out Texas with neighbor support. What Karen Whitmore called parking terrorism. She turned to the jury. Was actually a man honoring his late wife, building community, and helping neighbors remember what it means to belong. Then she called me to the stand. I stood tall, not rehearsed, just real. Tell us about your truck, she said. I took a breath. Bought it the year Mary and I got married. We were broke. She wanted something blue. It had a busted AC and a dent in the door, but it got us home. Why did you park it where you did? Because that spot, I paused, my throat tightening, was where Mary and I used to sit every evening, watching the sunset. It's where I taught Jake to drive, where he made me promise to protect this land, and where I promised him I always would. A silence. No coughing, no fidgeting, just stillness. Karen tried to take this place from me with a clipboard and a fake boundary line, but I stayed. I stood my ground, because it wasn't just about a truck. It was about what it represented. Linda nodded gently. No further questions. The defense looked stunned. Karen's new lawyer, a nervous man named Steinberg, stood with hesitation. He tried to argue that she suffered from parking anxiety disorder. Said she had trauma from a childhood incident involving a shopping cart in a parking lot, that angled vehicles triggered her, that she wasn't malicious, just misunderstood. Even the judge had to pause and clear her throat to stifle a laugh. Counselor, she said, are you seriously asking us to excuse grand theft auto because your client has a fear of car orientation? Steinberg swallowed hard. When you put it that way. The final nail came from someone none of us expected. Karen's daughter. Jessica Whitmore. She flew in from California, requested to testify of her own free will. She stood at the witness stand, hands clasped tight. My mother always had control issues, she began, but when she became HOA president, it got worse. She turned into someone else. She took a shaky breath. She once called the police on me because I parked at a 5-degree angle in our driveway. I was 17, just learning to drive. Her voice cracked. She destroyed our family, and now she's trying to destroy this man's legacy. For what? A truck she didn't like. She turned to her mother. You made us all ashamed, Mom, and I'm done defending it. Karen broke. Right there in court. You don't understand, she screamed, eyes wild. He was ruining everything with that hideous truck, that stupid ranch. The judge banged her gavel hard enough to shake the table. Enough. The jury deliberated for exactly 32 minutes. When they returned, their verdict echoed through the courtroom like thunder. Guilty on all counts. Fraud, harassment, theft, misuse of public resources, forgery, conspiracy. The sentencing was swift. 2 years in state prison. Restitution of $1.5 million to the HOA. 500 hours of community service, teaching parking etiquette at the DMV. And a permanent restraining order, 500 feet from anywhere I might park. But as they cuffed her, Karen turned. Her eyes locked on me, cold, desperate. And then she said it. The thing that left the room buzzing with questions. This isn't over, Bob Harrison. I know something about Jake, something you don't. Check his record from Austin. The deputies pulled her away. The judge shouted for silence. But it was already too late. The seed had been planted. Jake's face was stone. And for the first time since this all began, I felt something new settle deep in my chest. Doubt. What was she talking about? What record? What did she know? And why did my son suddenly look so damn pale? She said she knew something about Jake, something I didn't. I didn't want to believe her, but doubt has a way of growing roots. After the sentencing, most people thought the story was over. Justice served, ranch protected, Karen in an orange jumpsuit, the internet rejoiced, memes were born, my F-150 even got its own fan page. But something about the way she said it, check his record, from Austin, lodged in my chest like a splinter. I didn't want to believe it. Jake had always been a good kid. Quiet, strong, the kind who didn't pick fights but finished them if he had to, became a sheriff to help people, to protect what mattered. But I couldn't shake it. Not just because of what she said, but because of the look in his eyes. When Karen dropped that line, something inside him shifted. His shoulders stiffened, his jaw tightened, and for a second, just a second, he looked afraid. That night after the trial, we sat on the tailgate of the F-150, just like we used to, stars above us, crickets all around. He handed me a beer. Hell of a day, huh, he said. Yeah, I replied, justice tastes like Miller Lite. He chuckled, but it was hollow. We sat in silence for a while. Then I asked, you want to tell me what she meant? He didn't answer right away. Just stared out into the darkness. I knew it'd come back someday, he said quietly. I was hoping it wouldn't. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Old, worn. Here, he said. I unfolded it. A parking citation. Austin, 2006. $50 fine, expired meter, University District. That's it, I asked. He nodded, that's the scandal. He pointed to the corner of the paper. I paid it the same day, was so embarrassed I kept the receipt for 20 years. I stared at him. That's what she meant. He grinned, apparently. I laughed so hard I almost dropped the beer. All that build-up, over a college parking ticket. He raised his bottle in a mock toast. Turns out the sheriff's got a dark past. The chat on that night's livestream hit 400,000 viewers as we told the story. People couldn't believe it. The tension, the threat, the reveal. A $50 meter ticket from 2 decades ago. Karen really thought she had her smoking gun. But as it turns out, her final card was a dud. Or so we thought. Because Karen may have lost the trial. But she wasn't done. The first sign came 3 nights later. I woke up at 3 a.m., not from noise, but from silence. Too silent. Stepped out on the porch, and every light on the ranch was out. The barn, the main house, even the security cameras. Power cut. Deliberate. I grabbed my flashlight and headed for the junction box. When I opened it, I found what I expected. Wires snipped clean, a note taped inside. Not all wars are won in court. I stared at it for a long time. The handwriting was shaky, slanted, but unmistakably Karen's. She was in prison. But someone was helping her on the outside. The next morning, I got a call from Sarah Davidson at Channel 7. "Bob," she said, "you might want to see this." She emailed me a screenshot. It was from a closed Facebook group. The Real Pinehurst Truth Coalition. Dozens of members. And a pinned post that read, "Harrison Ranch is still a threat to our values. Legal defeat is temporary. Community pride must be restored by any means necessary." Jake got a search warrant within 48 hours. Turns out the group was being managed from Karen's prison tablet. She'd been organizing supporters, messaging allies, even coordinating visits, with instructions on where to leave packages, what wires to cut, and who to pay. She wasn't just bitter, she was building something. A network. And what she did next. That made it personal. Because she didn't come after me. She came after Jake. 1 week later, an anonymous envelope arrived at the sheriff's office. Inside, a photo. A young man, clearly Jake, standing in front of a college protest group in Austin, holding a sign that read, "Parking enforcement equals government overreach." It was from his university days, before the badge, before the uniform. There was no scandal. But that didn't matter. Within days, local blogs ran headlines. Sheriff Harrison, secret anti-government past. Did Harrison lie about his law enforcement loyalty? The noise got loud, fast. And Karen's people, the ones still on the outside, fed the fire. Comments flooded every article, anonymous tips, claims that Jake was biased, that he'd protected me illegally, that the trial was a sham. It was pure noise. But noise spreads. The county board scheduled a review hearing. Jake's badge was on the line. And just like that, she'd flipped the script again. From defendant to accuser. From criminal to victim. Jake met me on the porch that night. His uniform looked heavier than usual. "You think I messed up, Dad?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, I think you did what was right. But they're coming after me now." I looked him in the eye. Let M. Because the truth. Karen wasn't just fighting for control anymore. She was fighting for vengeance. And people like that. They don't stop until they lose everything. Or take someone down with them. The next day, Jake turned in his badge. Not because he was guilty, but because he wouldn't let the department become collateral damage in her crusade. "Temporary leave," he said. "Let them do their little review. I've got nothing to hide." He smiled at me, tired but calm. "In the meantime, let's finish what she started." "What do you mean?" He pulled out a rolled-up blueprint. Harrison Ranch. Renovation plans. He'd secretly been working on it for months. Expanding the barn. Adding a community center. And at the center of it all, the Parking Museum. A real county-registered nonprofit organization dedicated to HOA awareness, civil rights, and yes, parking freedom. This land doesn't just represent a fight anymore, Dad, he said. It represents something bigger, a stand, a symbol. We broke ground the next week. Volunteers poured in. Local businesses donated supplies. Stream viewers raised over $300,000 in crowdfunding. And Karen. She watched it all unfold from a prison tablet. One viewer said she was still commenting on HOA forums, begging people to protest. But the community had changed. Because of the truth. Because of the fight. And because of one old rancher who refused to move his truck. She couldn't beat us in court, so she tried to bury us with fire, lies, and fear, but she forgot what kind of people build their lives on ranchland. 2 months after Jake turned in his badge, things started to feel normal again. Construction on the Harrison Ranch Community Center was ahead of schedule. Volunteers showed up daily. High school kids painted fences. Veterans helped lay the foundation for the new parking museum. A local barbecue joint even brought lunch every Friday free of charge. We called it the Parking Party Revival. It wasn't just about parking anymore. It was about place, about belonging, about drawing a line in the dirt and saying, this far, no further. But even as the ranch thrived, we kept hearing whispers. Karen wasn't done. She still had connections, loyalists. And they were planning something. We didn't know what or when, but the feeling hung over us like a dark cloud. Then, on the third Saturday of September, it happened. At 4:23 a.m., the security cameras, the new ones Jake installed himself, triggered an alert. 5 masked figures, no license plates, black SUVs. They didn't go for the house. They went for the barn. The heart of the ranch. The place Mary and I built together, where I taught Jake to saddle his first horse, where neighbors stored hay, tools, and memories. And they torched it. Gasoline, road flares. The fire started fast, violent, hungry. By the time the fire department arrived, the old barn was a skeleton. Jake and I stood at the fence line, helpless, watching flames swallow 20 years of our lives. Ash rained down like black snow. The sun hadn't even risen yet. They knew where to hit, Jake said, his voice low and shaking. They knew what mattered. He was right. This wasn't vandalism. It was a message. In the ashes, we found a metal plate burnt at the edges, with 4 words carved into it. Harrison Ranch, condemned by pride. Signed anonymously, but the meaning was clear. A Karen. Or someone acting on her behalf. The sheriff's department launched an investigation. The fire marshal called it arson, but with the perpetrators masked and no clear evidence leading back to Karen, it became just another cold case. Karen, of course, denied it all from prison. Issued a statement through her new attorney. I am deeply saddened by the violence at Harrison Ranch. I do not condone such behavior. However, this is what happens when communities are provoked and traditions disrespected. She'd gone from HOA president to arson apologist in under 200 words. But instead of breaking us, the fire lit something else. A fuse. Within days, the community rose up again. Volunteers cleared the debris. A contractor donated lumber. A nearby church sent their entire youth group to help rebuild. The stream viewers, they raised another $500,000 in 5 days. And then, something amazing happened. Jake stepped back into the sheriff's office, not as an officer, but as a citizen. He demanded a town hall, a public forum, to air every grievance, every complaint, every truth live, in person, in front of every HOA, every board, every person who'd ever been bullied by a clipboard. They scheduled it for Friday night. The local high school gym overflowed. Nearly 1,000 people packed in. Ranchers, suburban families, teachers, teens, old-timers, everyone from Pinehurst to the outer county line. Even Jessica Whitmore flew in from California. Took her seat in the front row. Nervous but proud. And at the center of it all, under the harsh gymnasium lights, was me. Just a rancher. Just a man who parked his truck in his driveway and ended up igniting a revolution. I walked up to the podium, took a breath, and looked at them all. "I'm not here to make a speech," I said. "I'm here to make something clear." I pulled out a scorched horseshoe, the only thing that survived the fire. This came from the barn, from the ashes. It's all that's left of a building that stood for 2 decades. You want to know what else it stood for? I paused, let them sit with the silence. It stood for neighbors helping neighbors, for kids learning to ride, for holiday dinners, for late-night repairs, for honor, for place. I held up the horseshoe. You can burn wood, you can destroy buildings, but you can't burn truth, and you damn sure can't intimidate a town that remembers where it came from. The crowd erupted. But I wasn't done. Jake took the mic next. He spoke not as a sheriff, but as a son. 6 months ago, he said, my dad was threatened for parking his truck. 6 weeks ago, I stepped down to protect my department, but I never stopped watching, investigating, connecting the dots. He pulled out a folder, slammed it on the table. Inside this file, financial records, names, timestamps, everything we needed to confirm what we feared. He looked toward the camera streaming live to 600,000 viewers. One of the arson suspects was Karen's former assistant, the one who resigned 2 weeks before the sentencing, the one she called from her prison tablet 17 times in 3 days before the fire. The room went dead silent. Jake continued. We now have confirmation that Karen, even from behind bars, continued directing members of the HOA to target the ranch. Harassment, surveillance, smear campaigns, and finally arson. The room exploded. Shouts, gasps, tears. And then Jessica stepped forward. Walked up to the podium, strong, steady. I came here today not as Karen's daughter, but as someone who believes in healing. What my mother did was wrong, but we don't fight fire with fire, we fight it with community. She held up a new motion. A proposal. To officially dissolve Pinehurst HOA's power over any adjacent non-member lands, forever. To remove their legal reach. To end their ability to control anyone beyond their own gates. It passed unanimously. And just like that, the war was over. Karen had burned the barn. But the community had built something stronger. Something permanent. A movement. The final shot of the stream that night. Jake and I standing under a new sign. A fresh arch at the entrance of Harrison Ranch. It read, "Parking free and legal since forever. Karen tested, community approved." Sometimes, karma doesn't just come around. Sometimes it parks right in front of you and calls you dad. 6 months after the fire, Harrison Ranch looked like something out of a dream. Where there was once charred rubble, now stood a barn stronger than ever. Expanded, reinforced, full of life. Children ran through the hayloft. Neighbors dropped off homemade pies and jars of preserves like it was 1952 again. Even the cows seemed happier. And right at the center of it, all my old F-150. Parked in a heart-shaped pattern of hay bales. Just like Mary used to love. We called it the parking party. 30 vehicles lined the pasture, spelling out one word in bold block letters for the drone flying overhead to capture. Justice. The video feed streamed live to over 800,000 viewers. Media trucks filled the gravel road. Flags waved. Sarah Davidson from Channel 7 was on site with her crew, beaming like she'd just won an Emmy. "I'm here," she said to the camera, "at the legendary Harrison Ranch, where 6 months ago, one man stood against the HOA machine and sparked a national movement. Today, we're celebrating freedom, community, and the right to park your truck wherever you damn well please." The crowd cheered. And me. I stood up on a makeshift wooden stage near the new barn, flanked by friends, neighbors, and folks I'd never met who flew in just to see what a parking revolution looked like. I took the mic, paused, looked around. "Never thought I'd be famous because of where I parked my truck," I said. Laughter rippled through the crowd. But what started as a joke turned into something bigger. Y'all made that happen, not me. You stood up, spoke out, pushed back, and reminded the world that land still matters, that neighbors still matter, that community still matters. Applause echoed across the field. But more than that, I continued, we proved something real. That you don't need a fancy law degree or a shiny badge to protect what you love. Sometimes all it takes is a beat-up pickup truck and the guts to say, "No, not here." The ovation was thunderous. Jake joined me on stage, dressed in civilian clothes now, relaxed, proud. He wrapped an arm around my shoulder as the crowd chanted, "Parking dad, parking dad, parking dad." I raised my hands, laughing. All right, don't let it go to my head." Jake stepped up to the mic. "When I was a kid," he said, "I promised my dad I'd always protect this place. Thought it'd mean fixing fences. Maybe chasing off a coyote or two." He paused, smiling. Didn't expect it to mean facing down an HOA president, armed with a clipboard, and a dream of world domination. More laughter. "But seriously," he said, his tone softening, "this fight reminded me why I became a sheriff in the first place, to stand up for the good ones. The quiet ones. The ones who build rather than take. And I want y'all to know." He pulled something from his back pocket, his badge, and held it up. "I've been cleared of all allegations. The board voted 5-0 to reinstate me, effective today." The crowd roared. Jake turned to me. "Back in uniform next week, Dad, but today, I'm just your son." I wrapped him in a hug that felt like it carried 20 years of memories. That's when Sarah Davidson ran up with a fresh scoop. "We've just confirmed," she said breathlessly, "that Netflix has greenlit a new docuseries, The Harrison Ranch Story. Filming begins next month." I smiled into the camera. I told him they can film whatever they want, as long as they park properly. Cue the internet melting down. We spent the rest of the afternoon celebrating. Kids took selfies in front of the F-150. Elderly couples hugged and cried. Local bands played covers of Take It Easy and Fight the Power in the same set, and somehow it worked. But then, right around sundown, a courier showed up. A letter, handwritten. Addressed to me. No return address, just 2 words. From Karen. I unfolded it slowly. The paper was soft, neatly folded, the handwriting unmistakably hers, but it wasn't sharp, it wasn't angry. It was different. Jake noticed, stepped closer. I read it out loud to the crowd, my voice catching slightly. "Dear Mr. Harrison, I'm writing from my current location, a correctional facility I once thought only other people belonged in. I suppose pride really does come before the fall. 25 years of Pinehurst life convinced me that property values mattered more than people. That order was more important than kindness. That control was the same thing as safety. I was wrong. I've started therapy, enrolled in anger management. I'm even learning to drive for the first time since 1994. My instructor says I'm terrible at parallel parking. The irony is not lost on me. I know I can't undo what I did, but I wanted you to know I finally see it. You weren't ruining the neighborhood. You were what made it worth living in. Sincerely, Karen Whitmore. P.S. I actually do know my real rights now. And parking wherever you want on your own land, that's definitely one of them. The crowd fell silent. For a long moment, no one said a word. Then from the back, someone started clapping. It spread, slowly, then all at once. They weren't clapping for Karen, not exactly. They were clapping for something bigger. The possibility of redemption. Even for someone like her. Later that night, after the crowd dispersed, Jake and I sat on the tailgate again. Just like always, 2 beers, 1 sunset, and the sound of cicadas singing from the mesquite trees. He looked out across the pasture, where tire tracks from the celebration crisscrossed like constellations. You know, Dad, he said, when I was 8 and promised to protect this place, I never imagined it would involve this much parking drama. I laughed, a deep, full belly laugh that echoed across the land. Life's funny that way, son, I said. Sometimes the biggest battles are over the smallest things. We fell quiet. The wind rustled the grass. I looked over at the spot where Mary and I used to sit. Where Jake learned to drive. Where the whole damn mess began. And I whispered the phrase that had become our motto. You can't tow justice. Jake raised his beer. And karma. He grinned. Sometimes it parks right in front of you, tips its sheriff's hat, and calls you Dad. Every HOA has a story on HOA headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.